Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We say at 3 o'clock, and Rome is a famous place for being punctual, so we have to start at the right time. So, first of all, welcome to this international conference on the Balkans. And thank you, and a special thanks to the speakers and to the chairman of the panels who took the pain to come to Rome and accepted our invitation. So thank you very much. We're very grateful, the foundation, we're grateful to you. Our foundation has always considered the Balkans to be a priority. And this is the second important conference on this subject, and others will follow, I warn you, if you continue to come, of course, together with new dedicated projects. The book with the proceedings of the first conference is on display and available at the entrance of this Congress Hall for free. There are very good reasons to be interested in the region. The first and the more obvious is geography. It is so close to us that all the capital are less than 2 hours flight from Rome. But what is more important is the relevance of the Balkans from a political, economic, and social point of view. They are important for the entire continent and perhaps beyond. And to be honest, there is a feeling that in the last few years, this relevance has been overlooked because of the emergence of threats and challenges in other parts of the world. But we believe, however, the time has come to devote a closer attention to the region with the purpose to give real support to overcome internal and external challenges. And this conference has been organized with the purpose of doing that. We would like to provide a good analysis of the root causes of the problems and to anticipate as much as possible concrete lines of action. We think that to have a dedicated yearly summit, as it is happening since a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, is symbolic, but it's not sufficient. And I have to say that the Atlantic Alliance has been and is an active actor and continues to keep an open door policy. Montenegro is a good case in point, and the country is going, as you know, through the process of accession. We have an operation running in Kosovo with KFOR, which is not very much known, but it exists, it's still on since many years. And then cooperation and interaction with the European Union are of the utmost importance. The two organizations have worked very well together in the past, but it is imperative that they continue to do so in the future. In fact, I believe the integration in the European mainstream should remain the final objective for all the countries of the Balkans. We have carefully chosen the subjects, as carefully as we could, of the 4 panels, trying to enlarge the horizon to the crucial issues. The first panel addresses the overall political situation, tries to do so. It was supposed to be chaired by the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Parliament of Croatia, but the poor fellow, he has a vote in the Parliament today and could not come, and so the panel will be chaired by the director of the foundation, Alessandro Politi, who happens by accident and coincidence to be also the political advisor of the KFOR commander in Kosovo. So, I mean, he's well justified for that. The second one looks at external actors who have a stake in the region and is chaired by a very experienced person and a good friend like Ambassador Benoit de Beauville. Tomorrow we will discuss the important issue, which is before our eyes every day, of illegal networks and criminal trafficking. And that panel will be chaired by Sorin Dukaru, Assistant Secretary General of NATO for Emerging Challenges. Zoran Joulevsky, in front of me, Minister of Defense for Skopje, will share the last one concerning the overall path towards integration. Thank you, Minister, for being here with us. I understand you had good news from Skopje in terms of electoral results. We are very happy about that. The final remarks will be made by the Honorable Vincenzo Amendola, responsible for the Balkans in the Italian government. I will end by saying that our foundation has the ambition, continues to have the ambition, to develop in-depth strategic analysis on outstanding issues. those issues that are of special interest to the Euro-Atlantic community. And in doing so, we draw from a large network of countries and an extended international expertise, starting with the college itself. I think that more than ever, we are in demand for a clever analysis of facts and an intelligent interpretation of strategic trends. And we would like to continue to do so in scientific freedom and respect for different opinions. And having said that, I thank you very much for your attention, and you have the Dean of the College.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir, giving me the floor. And I must say, it's always a challenge to be the second speaker, because, what I had to what I have on my list here, it was almost completely presented by Ambassador Mitoritsa. So I try to explain why we see, as a NATO Defense College, the Balkans as a very important region for us. Normally we discuss well-known threat using the 360 degrees approach of NATO. So we start on east with Russia and its assertive approach to European security. Then we go to the south, and mostly we are concerned with radical extremism and an uncontrolled migration. Then when we go north, we can discuss, and that's the topic again which was put somehow aside, that's high north. And we shouldn't forget internal frictions we have inside not only NATO, but European Union and other organizations, because you notice the growing nationalism, let's say pushing the national interest, not really good cooperation in some areas, and diminishing cohesion. That's the issue we should be aware of. So when we speak about these threats and then we direct the attention to the Balkans, we see everything basically in projection from the daily life. So we see that the roads for migrants, basically the Balkan, that's the gateway to the Europe. We see interest of Russia in some countries and how to change, how to push their national policies and interest in some countries. I think that we are totally right when we connect some organization in the Balkan, in some countries with extremists, with Islamic State. So basically that's the way how we have to see and approach the Balkan at all. And that's why my institution, so NATO Defense College, was so pleased to support this initiative together with, as Ambassador said, with our sister organization, NATO Defense Foundation, and with the Centro European Initiative and the Balkan Trust for Democracy. We are really pleased that the title of the conference is Cooperative Security and the Human Security, because we see clear connection. Cooperative security, it's a core task for NATO, which was set basically the strategic concept 2010. And the human security, basically, it's a cross-cutting phenomenon ranging from basically addressing everything from economic prosperity, technology, environmental issues, and social justice, just to name some of them. So anything what we do as a NATO must be part of what we call comprehensive approach. And you know that NATO is not the best suited organization for comprehensive approach, because we master the military, we master kind of diplomacy and political issue, and the rest is dedicated to European Union, other international organization, or non-government organization. So I was delighted using this opportunity to send my representatives from NATO Defense College to yesterday's conference hosted by Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, addressing prospect for European Union enlargement in Western Balkans. And that's the reason why even today the NATO Defense College is properly represented, not by me, but by my head of research division and some researchers, as well as a head of Middle East faculty. So we see the connection between research, outreach, partnership, and of course, Balkans very clearly. Ladies and gentlemen, just as we say, to cut the long story short, let me wish you to have a great and successful conference with many positive and mindset-stimulating reports and presentation. And who is not Italian, let me wish you enjoy the stay in Rome. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. So, Alessandro, the first panel is ready.
Evening. If I might invite the speakers of the first panel here to the podium so that we can start our work. I would call, please, Yanis Alexis Zepos, the ambassador, our good friend Ivan Vejvoda, Mrs. Angelina Eichhorst, and Mr. Savo Kentera. So before starting, please let me just make the usual disclaimer in these cases. I am just, the director of the NATO Defense College Foundation. In my other capacity today, I don't exist, but whatever I say is absolutely, my own personal opinion, and it doesn't involve NATO or whatsoever NATO agency or governmental agency you would like. Thank you very much. We all are here for a good reason, and it's not connected, frankly, to the 4 arrests we have had in Venice very recently. I assure you that when news broke out in Pristina, we said, okay, it's serious, we understand. But frankly, the issues in the region are much more pressing than just, 4 people that unfortunately have been radicalized and found now the way to a trial. And the problems are not so much correlated with terrorism as anyone in the region could tell you without waiting for some outside pundit to say that the Balkans are dysfunctional. They are not dysfunctional because the border is not good, or because the subdivision of people across borders is not good. No, the real problems happen within borders. How you organize, the living together of the citizens. How economy ticks up. Unemployment is a very, very serious problem in the area. I wish you would have a look at villages where unemployment is over 60%. I generally come from a country, this country, where unemployment numbers are quite high, and juvenile unemployment is very high. In fact, youth are emigrating. And I assure you they're doing exactly the same thing that also the Balkanic counterparts do. They emigrate abroad because there is no opportunity, full stop. The second thing, which is quite worrying, is how to connect really with the European perspective. Some countries have already entered the accession path, for instance, Serbia. And they are doing, their job. Good, bad, you might like the new government, or better, the future government, or not. Surely the new president. But they know very well that from Brussels there are signals that are on one hand encouraging. The tour of High Representative Mogherini and her interventions to keep alive the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue were very welcome and very useful. By the way, an important symbol of division fell down between the Serbian-speaking minority and the Albanian-speaking majority in Kosovo. But then there are other signals that say, well, sorry, forget it, There is no appetite for expansion, despite, the new accessions are frankly, no big deal. The third problem is the effect of globalization. This is truly global, and the Balkan Six are a fragile belt, because they have their own fragilities, because they are countries that have emerged quite recently from a war. It was almost yesterday, 18 years ago. And they are struggling to set up, a functioning state where already much richer countries, much more structured ones, have problems to let function their own nation states, which are hollowed out by globalization. And then come, the typical problems of the area. But I think here the best persons that might, discuss about them are surely my colleagues of the panel, and so I would like to invite Ambassador Yanis Alexis Tsepos to take the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let me first of all express my sincere thanks to the organizers of this conference, and especially to Ambassador Minuto Rizzo for including me in the speakers. And I'm very happy to be in Rome at this table and to discuss this issue, which obviously is very important to my country, historically. The Balkans is a region, but is also a concept, an historically pejorative concept, which has given birth to other negative concepts, such as Balkanization. This pejorative perception is a challenge to Europe and Europeanness, as it goes against all those ideals and principles embedded in the European project, which is inherently anti-nationalist and progressive. The countries of the Western Balkans face a number of serious challenges. Most of these challenges demand a strong commitment from their leaders. At the same time, stereotypes persist and ancient hatreds are latent but combustible. For example, national institutions, including the judiciary, are often highly politicized, and democratic bodies regularly face challenges such as opposition parliamentary boycotts. In addition, the processes of state and institution building, reform and integration are incomplete and often have to be conducted at the same time as managing sensitive inter-ethnic relations, fighting organized crime and corruption, working to increase judicial independence, encourage media freedom, and reforming public administration. Moreover, legacies of the conflicts in the 1990s include issues which still affect some bilateral relationships related to borders, war crimes, prosecutions, and missing and displaced persons. Further efforts are also needed to ensure good neighborly relations. The Western Balkans had also to cope with the large population flows of the recent refugee and migration crisis. Also, in common with the rest of Europe, the countries of the Western Balkans have to address the threat of growing extremism, radicalization, and returning foreign fighters. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Implementing state-level decisions at the entity level remains a challenge for Bosnia and Herzegovina. All levels of government in the country face a long and demanding program of reforms required for the continued progress on the path toward EU membership, and an independent judiciary, remains a cornerstone of these reforms. The implementation of these much-needed reforms will require all of the available political commitment, goodwill, and unity of purpose. Serbia. Serbia is making considerable contributions to UN and EU operations, deploying armed forces on multinational operations that are based on resolutions of the UN Security Council. The popular perception of Euro-Atlantic institutions in Serbia is still overwhelmingly negative. At the same time, Russia is making efforts to increase its influence in Serbia using political messaging and media tools and through economic and emotional ties. The continuation of the process of implementing the agreements reached within the EU-facilitated dialogue for the normalization of relations between Belgrade and Pristina are of significant importance. The former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia should ensure that good neighborly relations with other countries of the region continue to develop and improve. It should also continue making efforts to build a truly functioning multi-ethnic society. Moreover, the country had been taken further away from core transatlantic values such as rule of law, media freedom, judicial independence, and democratic dialogue. Kosovo. The political situation remains fragile. Kosovo is facing a challenging socio-economic and demographic situation that has produced protest and motivates people to leave Kosovo for economic reasons. Social unrest remains a significant factor in the development of extremism and radicalization. The phenomenon of foreign fighters remains a potential security concern. Following the decision by President Thaci to transform Kosovo's security force into a regular army with heavy weaponry, NATO has warned Kosovo of potential consequences and that it could scale back its cooperation with the security services. All in all, continued and additional actions are needed in order to encourage the long-term development of conditions for security and stability in the Western Balkans. Further work is needed to ensure that the whole region continues to develop in terms of security, stability, and cooperation, with no part of the Western Balkans left behind. European and Euro-Atlantic integration of the countries of the region advances democratic values, reform and respect for the rule of law, and provides a path to stability and strengthening collective security. However, in the case of the Western Balkans, integration is seen by many as an introduction to Europe rather than as a return to Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, especially for this last point between return and introduction. I think in a certain sense it is surely return. On another hand, Europe has been so much transformed, especially in these last 30, 20 years, that it would be interesting to see if it is also an introduction to something completely new and not always horribly convincing. I would like now to pass the floor to Ivan Vejvoda, he the permanent fellow of the Institute for Human Sciences in Vienna. Ivan, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And like Ambassador Zepos, I'd also like to thank the organizers and the NATO Defense College Foundation for the invitation and to have the honor to be among the distinguished speakers of this conference. I was a speaker also yesterday at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I apologize to those who were there that I will say some of the same things that I said, concurring with the analysis of the ambassador and try to add humbly to some of the arguments that were exposed and maybe expand on a few in the 10 to 15 minutes that I will be talking. Let me start out by saying that, of course, we all had the illusion that the transition to democracy, as it used to be called, if you remember, was going to be speedier and deeper than it transpires that it is. One does not have to have read Alexis de Tocqueville's seminal work on l'Ancien Régime et la Révolution to know that the old regime lives for a very long time within the new regime, and thus the birth of institutions and everything that the ambassador said about the consolidation of democracy, the rule of law, and the values-based that lead to a society where freedom of speech and association and human rights are enshrined, namely that checks and balances work, takes much longer in practice than one would like it to. And those of us who are citizens, of course, would like it to be much faster, but we see that the winds of the past, the inertia, is sometimes stronger. And as our moderator so wisely said, all this is happening within a very difficult global economic situation where there is very little growth, at least until 2008, and where the rates of unemployment, in particular of youth, are so high, and where we are confronted with the double challenge both of a brain drain of our future, namely the young experts who are leaving looking for better lives and professions outside of the area, and a very dramatic demographic decline in most of our countries. And it is within this situation that our elected leaders, whom we are trying to keep accountable and responsible after they are elected, are navigating these meanders, all the while, as was said, confronted with the multiple challenge with which Europe itself is being buffeted. Those internal of populists from left and right who want to contest the society that we're living in, and from the outside, namely Russia in principle when this region is being looked at. As some of you recall, the Russian foreign minister at the Munich Security Conference just 2 months ago wished for a post-Western world. I don't think he could have been clearer than that. And so for us, I believe, if we share the values of democracy, then it is about the defense of the liberal democratic order in Europe, I would say in the US, but also in this region that can make a contribution in resisting the siren's call of a social conservatism or of a regression towards something that oxymoronically is called illiberal democracy. All the while, of course, trying to constitute the foundations of a more stable democracy. The global strategy that has recently appeared and that was presented by the High Representative of the EU, Federica Mogherini, has a key concept in it, and that concept is resilience. This is not a new concept. It's about, comes from metallurgy, and it talks about metals that can be bent so as not to break. We have had resilience in the Balkans historically, being buffeted by imperial forces from various sides, and our societies have bent not to break, and our cultures and religions and languages have survived. And thus, I think we have a bit of a depth of that particular human force, part of human security, I would say. This is not anything that one should be too proud of, but it helps in times of difficulty. And the European Union, as you know, is looking to implement the global strategy now. It's a question of how does one make resilience both internal and external within our societies, how do we strengthen that, but also externally, how do we make our states resilient to the challenges that come from the outside. There's a lot of talk these days that these countries are more stabilocracies rather than democracies, and that as that advertisement of the Financial Times newspaper was saying, we live in financial times, these days we live in geopolitical times. And so it behooves the countries themselves to work more on their democracy as the external supporters, the EU and the US, I would say still, are more interested in stability in the region and close a blind eye to some of the issues that the ambassador mentioned on media freedom, on the fact that the judiciaries are not up to speed in their reform processes, and all that is concomitant to that. This is the reality, and there's no skirting that reality. It is in the interest of the European Union that this region remains stable, that it is able to resist the penetration of Russian hybrid war and other techniques through their various media outlets, whether it's Sputnik or RT, and of course the financing of parties that are close to them and that usually send their representatives to Crimea. A Serbian party of that sort had its members go to Crimea about a month ago. I would say that these forces are still a minority within our countries. If you look at the last Serbian parliamentary elections where I come from, they amount to about 13% of the votes, whereas the rest of the members of parliament are basically turned towards a pro-European course. And so I would say, and this is a slight difference of view from the ambassador, yes, on particular with the case of NATO, there is opposition in Serbia to joining it, but I would say in terms of European integration, there's still strong support. Strong support is not of the North Korean type at 99%, and I say that what we have in Serbia today is a support on a given day anywhere a bit around the 50% mark. Today it's lower, around the 44, 43%. I call that a very healthy support. And as Undersecretary Amendola said yesterday at the Farnesina, he said when an interlocutor was mentioning to him in the Balkans, he said, well, actually you are at European levels of support for the European Union. So I think at least there's some convergence in public opinion polls. I say it's healthy because people do follow everything that's going on in the European Union. They know the troubles, and in terms of the countries of the former Yugoslavia, that are 7 today, everyone has family since the late 1960s through the Gastarbeiter phenomenon, and there have been contacts through the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Everyone has some member of their family in France, in Sweden, in Germany, in Austria, you name the country. And so people are fully aware. But people still do want to join, and I submit to you that if we had a referendum, on Sunday we would have a majority of people who would vote clearly to join the European Union. Why? Because simply people know that there is a little more security, a little more certainty, and a little more prosperity within the Union than staying outside it. Nobody neglects the challenges. Nobody is diminishing the kind of problems with which the European Union is confronting itself, and yet they know that it's better to be member of a club that still has 500 million people than to stay a country of 7 million surrounded completely. There's loose talk about this being the periphery of Europe. No, it's not the periphery, it's the inner courtyard. We are completely surrounded by European Union and NATO members. And I would add to that, that during the migration crisis, the refugee crisis of a couple of years ago, these countries were de facto members of the European Union because they were constantly at the decision-making table, collaborating with the key countries such as Germany and others in resolving what was called the Balkan route. Without them, there wouldn't have been a solution. And when you talk to the leaders of the region, they were in constant contact with Brussels and with the key capitals. And as I heard myself from Minister Yolewski in Washington, where he came, there's clear collaboration between all of these countries along the route, demonstrating the kind of European responsible behavior that is warranted for someone who wants to join the Union. By that, I want to add that there is a lot more regional cooperation that meets the eye in the press. Regional cooperation is not news. It's the bad news, like the train going from Belgrade to Kosovo, multicolored, multilingual, trying to send a message which was basically a spin doctor type of message that ended the way it should have ended. There is much more cooperation between the youth, between cultural institutions. Let's not talk about sports. People are going backwards and forwards. And then, as those of us who know people on the negotiating teams to join the European Union, they are constantly talking to each other. People from Serbia calling up their colleagues in Zagreb and saying, how did you solve this particular issue on this chapter? Or calling up their Montenegrin colleagues. And this is something I think we need to take into account. Finally, civil society is a key component of what we need in terms of a resilience and of the checks and balances. And I would like to say that we see the civic energy, and I will only take the example of Belgrade, where there was massive protests of people on this issue called Savamala, when some buildings were being destroyed, and when people simply do not and will not take extreme actions that seem of the ultimate corrupt type to take a stand. All in all, the countries themselves, it behooves them to work on the democratic reforms. They, of course, need help, and that's the principle of solidarity, and that's why the European Union exists. If the commitment that was heard from the last Council of the European Union in March that reiterates the Thessaloniki promise of 2003 is kept, and it hasn't been negated at any moment in these 16 years, in spite of what is called the fatigue, and I guess we'll talk about that a little later, then I think we are on track. Yes, much longer than we all expected, but there's nothing easy in life, and nothing was given ever on a plate in terms of democracy. This was always fought for by the citizens themselves, and that is part of the learning process of democracy in this region as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivan. There are sometimes structural factors that are under our own noses and that just, get unnoticed simply because day by day we don't see them. Brain drain and demography. If you look at the projections of the UN in the next 100 years, you will see that all geographic regions will experience a very important demographic decline, except for one, Africa. So I know in 100 years, unfortunately, other people will continue discussing in other conferences. But gouverner, c'est prévoir. To do governance means to look ahead. And so if we just think that these problems will come to later, just have a look at what are, for instance, Russia and Ukraine in terms of demographic decrease. They are just depopulating. And this is something that, could assuage people understanding that there are no aggressive powers if they are not even able to control their own Dalny Vostok, their own Far East, because there is a silent Chinese migration taking over. Or it could, make think that rulers might try to snatch at the last minute, the last glimpse of power before a demographic decline. So this is a matter that goes under the table. I would like now to pass the floor to Angelina Eichhorst. She represents what I've seen in my travels around Europe, and not only Europe, a real diplomatic superpower. Many of the offices of the European External Action Service are bigger than any other embassy around, especially of big powers. So, Mrs. Eichhorst, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. Does it work?
Yes.
Good afternoon. afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's my first time in this forum. I look very much forward to a... It doesn't work. It doesn't, yes. Let's try this one. Now it does. Yeah, here we are. Look very much forward to a very interactive discussion.
Okay, let's use this.
And to a functioning microphone, yes. And you know, being the third speaker and just hearing Ivan exactly saying what you wanted to say brings you in that moment where you have to come up with something entirely different to still capture the audience. Which brings me perhaps to tell you how we concur from Brussels with everything that was said by Ivan, but actually also do and work on it. And there are a few new elements to those 20 years of EU support for the regions. And that is basically because the world has changed. I was meant to be talking to you about the systemic vision of the European Union for the region. You know that. You know Thessaloniki, you know the enlargement policy. Enlargement has been there since 1958. It's the best foreign policy success we've had in the European Union, and it will continue to be. Despite the fact, as we all know, President Juncker said it at the beginning of this commission, no enlargement. That was technically correct because none of the Western Balkan 6 were and are today ready to come in tomorrow. But politically it had a major impact. And you discussed that during your last seminar, and it's being discussed during a lot of fora, where we constantly list all the elements we would like to see in the Western Balkans. And we know them all. We have to fight corruption, we have to go for transparency, accountability, justice, we have to fight impunity, we have to make sure politically everything is fine, socially, economically, no inter-ethnic conflict any longer, etc. We know that. We have all the tools at hand. We have all the money available. We spent already between 20 and 30 billion of euros in the region over the past 10 years. So of course people want to know where has the money gone and where are the benefits for the citizens. And this is where we are focusing on now. That goes inside the European Union, in the member states, when we discuss EU, but that also very much goes in the Western Balkan 6 and in our neighborhood. Because that's today the point. Unemployment was mentioned. I was in Sarajevo yesterday. We discussed all the time why 60% of young people in Bosnia and Herzegovina have no job. And how come, after all these years of intervention and support, we've all done collectively with many institutions, that is still not resolved. And that is where we have to focus today. We are all concerned from a security perspective on the Western Balkan 6. Correct. And it has brought us, again, to refocus. It was mentioned. The European Council in March, for the first time since 13 years, reconfirmed unequivocal support for the European perspective for the Western Balkan 6. So that is there. And that we need to continue to capture within the member states. There is big support within the Western Balkan 6, as was said, sometimes even higher percentages of support for the European Union than we have within the EU. And that is what we need to capture. But in the public domain, a lot of space is left for others to come in. It was mentioned. Others with a different viewpoint, different role model, and others who project power in a very different way. And thank you for calling the EU the powerhouse. I hope you meant it globally also. But the point is, we have not as yet sufficiently projected power, confidence, and the ability to influence. I can tell you, I assist Mrs. Mogherini in the EU-facilitated Belgrade-Pristina dialogue. I replaced Fernando Gentilini. He's well known to many of you. I can see there our leverage and our influence. It's very powerful, but it's behind closed doors. It's there where we move and we can work. But today, citizens want us to be open out, discuss each and every step in the dialogue, put it at each and every step at the referendum, make sure that everybody has a say in it. And then you see, you lose that very point where you thought to still be able to influence. I don't say we've lost it, because particularly the dialogue, I'm convinced that will continue, and that will also give the right results. But today it is about meeting the needs of the citizens visibly, be present, visibly, be there, out there, across, not just in the offices of the embassies of the member states of the EU and the EU and of the United States and all others, but out there at community level. If we want to help address radicalization, organized crime, all the issues which were mentioned and we know too well, we have to make sure that we help and give the support at the local community level. And that, frankly, is still an area that has not been done enough. I don't say we Europeans have to do it, but at least to make sure that we work together to support the local mechanisms and that we stay focused, all of us, all actors on the ground, OSCE, UN, EU, United States, NATO, all together, and all those I did not mention, to be focused on that very path of European integration and enlargement and becoming member. Because as was said before, you cannot change geography, you cannot change history. The Western Balkans are part of Europe and they will be part of the European Union. Full stop. And that is where we need to focus now. I see the two elements I said, the focus on security helps us, EU, NATO, with a whole new series of actions, ideas, concrete measures, which did not exist 6 months ago. Today this is there and this will be implemented. But there's also a whole new action of what I say, occupying the public domain, not leaving the space to others, where we need to work and get the message out. And that definitely will be the focus, not only of Mrs. Mogherini, it's at the level of heads and states and government of the EU. And if we do not do this now within the next 2 years, I would say it's a very short time span we have, we actually risk to lose that traction we still have today of a high level of support for the EU within the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Eichhorst. I would like now to give the floor to Savo Kentera, who is the president of the Atlantic Council of Montenegro. Atlantic and Montenegro are, in these days, a very interesting combination of words, with just one, small addition. We are all very concentrated on the moves and the actions of our Russian counterparts, and they do play their game very professionally. I would like for us not to lose sight of another big influencer in the region who has the advantage not to use too much media, and it is China. Please look at Chinese investments. Please look where they do railways, open banks, prepare direct flights. What what rulers in the regions go to Beijing. What sort of collective exercises? I would just mention the 16+1, which involves, a lot of countries, not just the Balkan 6. Not because we should be xenophobic, but just in order to avoid these things that have already happened in the Mediterranean, where, we thought it was a mare nostrum, and we discovered that it was since 15 years a Cindoterranean, where suddenly, 10,000 people were evacuated during the Arab revolutions. 10,000 people is the equivalent of a division, and it happened with civil means, No fuss, great effectiveness. Please, Mr. Cantera, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to thank the organizers for inviting me and for being a part of this conference, but also for putting this very important topic and for basically talking about the Balkans again, because I had a feeling, that the Western countries somehow managed to forget the Balkans in the past period of time, like in the past 10 years, and now it's back in the focus, which is very good, And in that respect, it's always good to have such conferences and to talk about the Balkans as the region which was always through the history, in the focus of all major countries. At the same time, you mentioned Montenegro and NATO, and in that respect, I would like to thank all 28 countries for NATO countries for supporting us in the previous time and for ratifying the protocol on accession to NATO, and basically for letting us to be a part of NATO, not because we like to be there, not because they think that they need another country, which is a good value for NATO, but because I think because we deserve that, first of all, and because we proved in the past 10 years since the independence that we can be a reliable partner to all 28 countries. And what does it mean actually for Montenegro and for the region? First of all, it wasn't easy in the past 10 years to talk about NATO, to strive toward the NATO. It wasn't easy because of the historical circumstances. It wasn't easy because of some percent of the population which was against and still is against NATO. It wasn't easy because of the bombing in '99, and Montenegro was a member of Serbia and of State Union of Serbia and Montenegro at that time. And of course, it wasn't easy because of the Russian influence, and you mentioned that Russian influence at the beginning. So we had a number of obstacles. We still have those obstacles, and I believe that we will continue to have the obstacles even when we actually become members of NATO. Not in a way that somebody can prevent us of being members of NATO, because I can say that we are basically already inside, but obstacles and everything what some other countries, and I will dare to say in particular Russia, will do everything what they can in their power to destabilize Montenegro, and not only Montenegro, but all other countries in the region, to show to everybody that those countries who are where there is a will to become a member of NATO or EU, that they are not ready because by their view there is no stability in those countries, and so on and so on. And we had a number of examples in Montenegro in the past 10 years when Russia actually tried with a very concrete example to prevent us to become a member of NATO. The latest example was on the 16th of October last year during the parliamentary elections, and that was the most visible example, to everybody, when they actually tried to, through some political parties and through some very concrete measures, to influence those elections and to destabilize the country. Fortunately, they didn't succeed in that. And as a result of that, we will have a very concrete, basically the special prosecutor will press charges quite soon, I think, against the leaders of some political parties in Montenegro and, of course, against some Russian citizens. And basically, you know, those kind of attempts were orchestrated by the Russian intelligence services. That's something what everybody who is dealing with these issues with the security, let's say, issues knows very well. But, you know, from time to time we have to admit and to accept the reality and to face with the facts who are our real partners and who are the partners only on the paper. I'm talking about the Partnership for Peace program. In that respect, where also Russia is a member of that program, but also some other countries, and I think who are actually much bigger contributors to NATO than some NATO member countries. So basically, there was a huge disinformation campaign in the latest period of time, especially in the past 2 years, not only in Montenegro, but in the region as well, through, and Ivan mentioned that, through Russian media, either through Sputnik or RT or some other media, through social networks and so on and so on. And everything in respect and with the main goal to show that Montenegro and maybe some other countries later on are not ready to become members of NATO and later on the EU. We managed to show to everybody that Montenegro is a stable country, that Montenegro is a democratic country, and that for us, NATO and the EU means changing the values. Not only because we are not becoming members of NATO and the EU just because it's a better standard or because of the security reasons. For us in Montenegro, it means for the very first time that we are changing basically the whole system of values and that we are moving for the very first time in our history toward the West. That's something what probably the current generation still don't realize, but I believe that the next generations will realize when they actually see the effects of being members of NATO and later on of EU. And in that respect, I think that we cannot talk about the security and the stability of the region until all the countries from the region becomes members of NATO first and then of EU. It's something like a must for all those countries who are still not inside, including those who proclaimed neutrality as their political goal. What does neutrality mean today? Which countries are neutral today? Because I really don't recognize a single country in those terms, in the traditional terms, as a neutral country. So I really think that Bosnia, Macedonia, Serbia, that for all of them there is only one future, and that is basically first NATO and then EU. If we want to speak about the stability of this region, if we're going to speak about the prosperity of the region. In that respect, since we have some half an hour more for the discussion, I would like to leave more space for questions and then to provide answers if there are. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Savo, for that, allow me the pun, savvy time contribution. And I think now it's really time to open the floor to discussion. So please, who would like to take the floor? There are, I imagine, some flying microphones. Please stand up and just, you know, qualify yourself. Please, madam. Welcome.
Hello. I'm a Syrian student. I study here at the University of Rome, Piazza, and I would like to ask
Your mic.
Cantora.
Just a second, please. Yes.
Hello. I'm a Montenegrin student here in Rome, University of Rome La Sapienza.
and I would like to ask Mr. Kandera what's his opinion on the upcoming anti-NATO protest to be held in the capital city of Montenegro on Saturday. Thank you.
If somebody thought that this was just an academic discussion, you see it is not. Please, Sam.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to see some Montenegrin students here, especially when they are coming from La Sapienza. And in respect of your question, you know, it is a democratic right to everybody to give a protest and to protest regarding everything, and in that respect regarding NATO as well. And it's not the first time that we have such a protest in Montenegro. We had them in the past, probably will have them in the future, and that's something what is happening in all democratic countries. So even in those countries which are the NATO member countries. So in that respect, anybody who is opposing NATO in Montenegro, he can protest, you know, but that's their opinion. From the other side, Montenegro will become member of NATO no matter on the protests, and we will basically and definitely ratify the protocol in the parliament very soon. So by all that, you know, I can freely say, and I will dare to say, that I'm expecting that we will sit actually together with all 28 countries already in May, on the 25th actually of May in Brussels at the small meeting. Thank you.
Very well. Please, who's next? I knew that my friend Ugo Poli from the Central European Initiative would have liked to tell something and to contribute to the discussion. Could you please bring the microphone to the gentleman? Thank you. Yes, but bring it. Get it here so it's faster, you know. Please.
I'm pleased to say hello to everybody attending this conference and express the satisfaction of the Secretariat of the Central European Initiative to see our friends of the NATO Foundation to organize this this conference in a so topic issue in these weeks of refocusing of the subject of Western Balkan accession to European Union and NATO for the countries concerned about this. I would just like to say that this satisfaction is relates to the fact that with the small resources that we can deliver as a donor to facilitate to bring together the people of our 18 countries constituency, we assessed the importance and the expectation that are widespread to have more opportunity to confront, to share experiences, to elaborate together on the best solutions to push ahead this historical commitment that is the full recovery of the unity of European peoples. I would like to say that I see one very meaningful point that I would like to submit to your consideration. Along with our campaign that started already in December 2015 and created around 20 events were similar to this along these months, what was repeatedly confirmed is that the migration crisis brought to evidence the lack of horizontal integration among EU member states and also with neighbors. This I have not to feed this sentence with the samples everybody saw along the last 1.5 years of this story. And I would like to say that actually in the organization of NATO, there is much more real operational integrations in the policy fields that are the topics of the alliance, also in terms of civil values and not only of security and military issues, as there are in the European Union policies in terms of relations among the member states. The harmonization and the unity of European Union policies are between states and Brussels, whereas to operationally bring together so-called harmonized regulations between Italy and Slovenia or Austria and Hungary seems much more difficult and practically exploded into the starting point of the critical condition of the community itself. This is something where I think it is the case to care, and also as a component of the improvement of the process and the commitments that are due to facilitate the preparation to membership by the candidate countries of the Western Balkan region. And the current intensification of the EU commitment and the preparation of the next summit in Trieste within the Western Balkan process is an opportunity that can become a much more shared playground as it was in the past, and as the events of these days in Rome are assessing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, the gentleman here in the middle, and then the next intervention.
Good evening, everyone. I am Filippo Simonelli, a student from Luis Guido Carli, and I would like to ask a question to Ms. Angelina Eichhorst, who said that she was focused on her action to found more space in public communication for pro-European means against the Russian-based propaganda based on Sputnik News on Russia Today or other legal or not means of propaganda. How would you like to take all these sort of fake news issues with a legal way? Is there a credible way to fight against these non-conventional media with the so-called mainstream media that are highly discredited among the public? Thank you.
Thank you. This was exactly what I was trying to say, not with the clarity you brought it, but that is what it all is about. And what we have set up internally now, we have a strategic communication team working on Eastern partners and the eastern borders of the European Union. We are going to do very similar work in the Western Balkans. And that means if you are on social media, on Twitter, or elsewhere, you can follow all the fake news that comes out, that our people bring together. They disseminate it everywhere in the Western Balkan 6, and they actually give the facts with it. That's one way of doing it. But these are, for the moment, starting actions, small actions. They will be scaled up, also with the help of the member states. But it's much more than that. You see, for the moment, if you look at the media, official media landscape, which it's still doubtful to what extent you need to focus on traditional media, by the way, because there's a lot of other other issues at hand. But if you focus on traditional media and traditional media channels, so the newspapers and the TV stations, there are very few independent ones in the area, as you know. And there are very few who actually have any interest to talk about the European Union at all. And there are also very few who have actually the message of what was said, the liberal democracy message, etc., in local languages. I don't want to give examples because then it is as if I'm projecting one station towards the other, but you know exactly what I mean. And that is where we left this space for quite a few years. We have not been sufficiently investing in this, in independent media, in addressing now fake news, and in tackling misinformation and disinformation. We have put the strategies now, we have everything in place, we just need to make sure that we put our resources where our words are.
Just having been in some past professional life, being a journalist, I would just add another thing beyond stratcoms. Strategic communication begins with the journalist itself, because you don't need to find fake news from certain Eastern European media. You can find them very easily, in your own national media. You just cross the border and you find fake news. The budget of a big company that says everything is okay, it's fake, but mystery, it is not so. The declaration of a politician that uses numbers that are evidently stretched, that's fake news. If we don't learn to do that at home, it's very difficult then, to go and spread the good word in other countries. And this is, very simple. It's the ABC of journalism. Check, go to the source, cross the informations, nothing particularly, extraordinary. But I see it is terribly lacking in a lot of so-called established media. Who the next, please? Yes, the gentleman, and then immediately the other before.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Vincenzo Delicato. I work for the Ministry of Interior, Department of Public Security. I would like just to react to some indication I received in this room, and I would like to just to say that from the security point of view, from the internal security point of view, we have many engagement with all the Balkans countries at bilateral level as well as at multilateral level and the European level. So during the latest years, our experience shows us that according to the dialogue on security, on the fight against transnational organized crime, terrorism, and all, I would say, global aspects of crime, we found some good practice also for the policy of the European agencies and the European institutions for the policy within the Balkan countries. So just to mention some projects, for instance, some project specifically related to improve the international cooperation within the Balkan countries. So I would like to ask to the representative of the external relation if you would mention some things on this aspect that, according to our experience, is very important also to create a link between those countries. We saw that many of those countries that few years later didn't have any point in common, any aspect to share, to be shared. With security aspects, with the international cooperation between law enforcement and judicial authorities, they started the dialogue. We didn't think it was possible. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, because it's very true that last 2 years, I would say, the cooperation has been very much focused not on the security at large, organized crime, counterterrorism, very much so. We had a major focus on foreign fighters. This is now a little bit aside and back to where it goes in terms of possible pockets of radicalization, a very big focus on that. But Italy has been investing a lot, one should say that. And you have been doing that very targeted, and a number of member states have so too. And thank you for that, because that's exactly what's needed, to have the expertise, to have the equipment. And today, countries, they are so much more sharing amongst themselves. There is still a lot of information sharing that needs to happen. But the work that is happening with Interpol, with Europol, with the different organizations, with us as EU, amongst the ministers of interior and amongst the police and the army, and there is so much. And I really like that part that Ivan brought it up also. We should never forget the work that is being done and all the results we've had so far. We always look at the bleak picture and where we need to jump in. Yes, very much so. But a lot, we should not underestimate the value and the level of the regional intra-six work that is being done behind the scenes. Meetings, exchanges, phone calls, constant contacts we don't see anywhere up in the public, but this is happening and it helps a lot also in this area. Having said that, security is a key priority for the EU now. We all know why, and that is also why that very, very cooperation with the Western Balkan Six will only intensify further, for sure.
Hi, everybody. Unfortunately, I'm not a student. I'm a president of a university in Dubai, American University in Dubai. I'm coming here just to learn from you because we are establishing a College of Security and Strategic or Global Studies and also a Center of Peace and Conflict Resolution in Dubai. But I feel that we are here as, I'm a researcher, okay. Research should be directed, strategic research, quality research, should go directly to, in Dubai we don't say we have problems, we always say we have challenges. So we are changing the terms. I mean, we want to solve the problems to be a member of the NATO and the EU, or we want to solve the problems to make the people happy, and then we go there. I mean, let us go to the disease and solve it, rather to go to the symptoms and work on it, if we are really loyal, committed, and very professional people. Thank you very much.
Ibn Sina wouldn't have said it better, you know, addressing the causes of diseases. So we learn from each other. But I think that it is a dynamic process, and I think, you know, if somebody of the panelists would like to, you know, react to these considerations, it would be most useful. Who would like to take up the question? Well, I think that on one hand there is, you know, the diplomatic requirement, and on the other there is the political necessity. And political necessity is about people. And I'm sure that if you look at the region, you will see that a number of politicians, despite the appearances, are very intent in measuring their own degree of consensus, not through polls, but from what they really achieve in concrete terms. And it is a race against time in some cases. So it is, the requirement from outside is a help, but the substance of what's done, you know, at home is the real stuff. There was a gentleman still here, you know, that wanted to take the floor. Was it you? Yes, please. If you stand up so that the micro can come. Thank you.
I'm Gregorio Baggiani, OSCE electoral observer and political consultant. I would like to ask what is the importance of the Western Balkans for the energy grid of the EU?
I didn't mention energy, but thank you for it's crucial. Definitely, we could speak the whole afternoon about. It works. Sorry, I didn't bring it up because I didn't want to go into details of each and every aspect, but energy. Gas provision, I would say, is the most. We have our colleagues here from Serbia. We know very well how important this is for the whole region, and it's important for the European Union. We need to have our own energy supply, food supply, and energy supply. I mean, that's so existential. So it does come up in all the work we have with the Western Balkan 6 quite regularly. If you know the process of how we work in enlargement and how we go through each and every area, very, very much in detail, tackling the root causes also, then you see how essential it is. So let me stop there and give it to you.
Yes, please, Ivan.
Yeah, if I may add to what Angelina said, and I think it's a very important question, and I think we all always have it on our talking points when we talk about it here, but the lack of time has simply impeded it. It is one of the most important questions because this is really where Russia has leverage. Most of our countries are dependent on Russian gas flows. And Gazprom is a very significant part of that. And as you know, the botched pipeline called South Stream, Eni from Italy was the main contractor. Often people ask, so why are you on this pipeline? Well, I like to say that we were taking the crumbs off the table and that it was the big Western companies that were really the negotiators. In fact, one of the former heads of Eni in a memorable interview to the Financial Times said he spends more time with the director of Gazprom, Alexei Miller, than with his wife. And I think that said a lot about things. Though South Stream failed, and it's really, this is where the EU and the European Energy Union comes in really. It's about diversifying the flow of energy to our countries and gas in particular. And as those of you who follow this, it's enough to see the debate on Nord Stream 2, how this impinges on all countries, a country like Germany, not only on this region. And I think that we would all like to see more investment into interconnectors, for example. In the case of my country, I think there's been a lag in building the interconnector between Serbia and Bulgaria, for example. There's more being done with Greece and Bulgaria. So these are things where I think we'd really like to see more engagement and activity. Yes, this is a long-term thing. You can't wean yourself off a certain energy source. And then the other part is where the US comes in, and that's LNG. And here, of course, for our region, Croatia is very important because of the Krk LNG terminal, which could be one of these alternative sources of supply and import of gas. I'll leave it at that.
Very well. Please, to the gentleman there.
Thank you very much. I'm Tomasz Nagy from Globsec Policy Institute, coming from Central Europe, and I would like to follow on a notion that was mentioned, that's enlargement fatigue. Coming from a country which was sidelined at the initial stage of the European enlargement for some time, I think I can understand how difficult it might be for the Balkan countries to feel that there is some kind of enlargement fatigue. And the question that I would like to ask is there another notion in Central Europe that is highly controversial, that relates to the future of European Union, that's the multi-speed Europe. I understand that it's still difficult to substantiate what it will actually mean. But have there been a multi-speed Europe, providing that there are many new coming countries, the new member states will not be a part of the European core, what it will imply for Western Balkans and their potential implications to the European Union? Will it make it anyhow easier, or will it make it more complicated? Thank you.
I'm not sure I fully understood your question.
Sure. Well, if there have been a multi-speed Europe, will it have any kind of impact on the enlargement policy of the European Union? Will the priorities change anyhow?
Look, today we are 28, we will be 27 and up. We are not even talking about 27 because it will go up in any case. And that's what I was trying to say earlier on enlargement. Enlargement does not stop for the EU because it's a very natural process, but it's also a very the necessity of integration of those countries, areas, who are already geographically part of the continent and part of the EU and of Europe, and where people want to become member, this will happen. And that's why I don't use the word enlargement fatigue. That's not because I want to deny. I mean, I know very well what is going on politically inside the European Union, but I see there's a big shift going on. There's a big shift inside the European Union. We will not talk here about the end of populism, because populism will always be there, and it's healthy. It keeps us alert. But today, already, people see much, much more the value of a strong, united European Union. And also, with that, it is in our interest to make sure that the Balkans are member and part, rather than somebody said left at the periphery, which of course is a wrong notion. I mean, it is at the center of what we are doing. So I'm not sure that answers what you're looking for. I don't, okay, thanks.
Yes, of course.
Yes, just to add very briefly, if I understood the question correctly, I frankly, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think a multi-speed Europe, which has been a reality in a sense from the beginning. Someone yesterday reminded us at the Fanazina conference that already in the first treaties of Rome, there's talk about flexibility. So I think that, and that's what we see. There are opt-outs, there are countries that are part of Schengen, others are not, the Eurozone, etc. I frankly don't see that as an impediment to the road that the Western Balkan countries are taking, and obviously the European Union will be a different animal in whenever, 5, 6, 7 years' time when we exceed. And I think that given that we're following, there will be ways. What I would like to plead for, and not only I, but many people, is to see if there are ways in which these countries can already be part of the discussion or on certain issues like they were during the migration crisis. Bring them in piecemeal on certain issues to train. And somebody actually said yesterday, I think they were right, the leaders of these countries should have been guests in Rome for the summit in March. Symbolically important, and this would have reverberated positively in the region.
There is also another consideration to be made. Europe is already multi-speed. We would love it would be seriously integrated in a number of things. But, you change country and you see that there are, important differences, in quality of doing certain things, of legislation, of implementation, of functioning systems. So the reality is to keep the convoy together, because otherwise there are a number of very private powers that, will just come like a pack of wolves. If that's what we want, fine, but I don't think it will be a bright future. This is a complex one where we muddle through, definitely. It's very, unsexy to shoot in a tweet. But that's real politics, The rest is unfortunately a lot of blah, blah. Please, next one. Oh, a lady immediately. Great.
Good afternoon. My name is Nina Ketsic. I'm also from Montenegro, but no longer a student. All of you mentioned the threat jihadism poses to the regional Balkans and the rest of Europe. I would like to, and you agreed upon the fact that this region was left on its own in the last 10 years.
I believe it has been left behind for much longer. And jihadism, it is from 91 that the expansion of radical Islam began in this region. However, today these countries did everything in order to consolidate their legal and security framework with the principles and methods of UN counter-terrorism strategy and EU strategy. I would like to ask you, how can NATO and EU help these countries counter the threats the jihadism poses, since it is no longer, region or the theater where these terrorist attacks are to be carried out, but the very logistic base? Thank you.
That's one of the good things being a member of NATO and the EU, sharing information. It's not the same, when you are in a partnership for peace, as many people think, that NATO and the EU will share with you as a country some sensitive information, some intelligence information, and when you are a member country. So it's a totally different approach. Thanks to that, and thanks to our way in the past period toward the NATO and the EU, we have a very good international cooperation with the intelligence services from the West and with the ministries of interior. And basically, all colleagues can prove that how that cooperation is good, and how actually we are cooperating in that sense by sharing those sensitive information, by cooperating, by dealing with all those sensitive issues in order to fight with the terrorism, with the violent extremism. And fortunately for us in Montenegro, we don't have some serious threats in that respect, so that we should be worried. But nevertheless, definitely something on which should we continue to cooperate. Thank you.
Anybody else from the panel? I would just give you a theoretical example, not of collaboration, but of things that are very down to earth. If you are in a village and you earn 200 euros a month, and then comes somebody and tells you, look, you can get other 20 euros a month if you go regularly to a mosque. And then you get other 50s if you veil your wife. And then you get another 30 if your kids attend regularly the courses. And if you, capture some terrorist and you put him or her to jail, and then there isn't the money to make a course so that the people can be recuperated instead of being left to their own devices, possibly radicalizing other people within prisons, which is an old phenomenon. You see that you have, very simple things to be done, but which take time. And that is even before, getting, of course, the exchange of information and so on. And in most cases, it is from that very specific background. It's not across countries. Every specialist will tell you that there are specific parts in a country, sometimes quarters of the city, where you have this phenomenon. And you have to go there with laser-like precision, instead of, blanket decrees or things like that. And this is true in Europe, EU, and in the other part of Europe, which are the Balkans. There was somebody else? Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Maurizio Maria Di Nitto, and I am a retired person who worked in the field of banking, economics, and finance, and with some experience in many parts of the world where I went to work. I listened with much attention to all the presentations and the questions that were put to the panel. It seems to me that being in the part of NATO does not exclude being in the European Union and vice versa. I think that the two don't exclude each other. And I think that one one matter that has not been brought up, or at least has not been discussed in depth, the need for a common foreign policy, economic policies, taxation. I think this is going to divide the Union because people are escaping from one place to another. I'm not speaking of refugees. I'm speaking just of companies that are going somewhere else where they find it more convenient. I think that this migration, this economic migration, does not help, and I think that this is something that should be confronted with. Thank you very much. If you would like to comment, I would appreciate it.
It's a very comprehensive question, and it will take more than 2 words. Common foreign security policy, this is really very much in the making, and I think the last 2 big examples we have is the global strategy put forward and endorsed by all member states, and please do read it. Get the grips of it. It was mentioned before, but there's a lot in there where you actually see that we are ready now to jointly gear up for being proper responding to the challenges and properly protecting ourselves, but also our neighbors around the whole of the EU. Economics, to me, frankly, it's not about the policies. It's about the implementation of everything we have and actually doing the work on the ground. They always say it's the economy stupid. Also for the Balkans, I would agree. It brings us back to the first point made on job creation and all that goes around it. But taxation is a very, very, very important issue. Yesterday there was meant to be a vote in the parliament of Bosnia and Herzegovina exactly on excess taxation, and it didn't pass. And it means actually Bosnia and Herzegovina will again possibly lose a lot of support from the IMF and the World Bank. Some may say, so what? But I would say, yes, a lot of what, because this really does not help you attract investors, building up the economy, and. So I could go on for this for long, we can do it over dinner. It is essential that we work on this very, very thoroughly.
And on this last question and answer, I would say our session is finished. And we have now time, a quarter of an hour for our coffee break. Thank you very much.
I'm actually in Vienna, in Vienna.
Deutsche Wertarbeit, gnädige Frau.
Yes.
I have another half.
Handling something like you get into the handling in the airport. Okay. Collaborate with Serbia or whatever. So if there is someone who you think could be helpful in this domain. Okay. The idea is it's a Greek company, it's a well-known Greek company. They do handling in Greece and other countries as well. And they're interested in expanding in Serbia. Okay. So
I'll jot that down.
So it could be done through collaboration, for example, with Air Serbia, but in a way has a monopoly. You know, it functions a little bit, I understand, in a funny way. It's still a little bit not linked to national or European practices. It's a bit on a nationalist, let's say, national model.
So we missed one person from the panel, or? Huh?
Mr. Evin.
He's here. I think this one is already working.
No, this one. This one. Could we start for the second panel? We have a very, we are happy to have a very distinguished member on the panel, which I will only introduce the discussion, and I hope we will have a very vivid discussion because it is a great issue to come. Alessandro warned us at the start that the Balkans were somewhat below the radar range of the European and NATO leaders, if only because they have been focusing on issues which are deemed more urgent. So we have to be politically very realistic. Brexit, Euro, the refugee issue will continue to be on the top of the agenda. Does that mean that the Balkans will be ignored? I don't think so, because the mood is changing. I think the Europeans are realizing that there is dangerous tension building up. Quite at the last foreign minister meeting, they spoke about Balkans, and in the Warsaw summit, it was also an issue of discussion. However, we have to see several issues which are going on the other side. The first one is obviously the dangerous Ukraine crisis. Now there is more than almost 3 years, and it is getting worse and worse. Second, the Balkans risk of becoming a soft underbelly of Europe, inviting new external power activism. And third, the right time frame for the implementation of a new policy in the Balkans is somewhat to be discussed, and there is no consensus on that. With 10,000 deaths and 1 million of refugees, except some news about the recent flaring in January of the blockade of the economic relationship between Kiev and the separatist region, Ukraine is not really in the news, at least in Europe, except those dramatic cases. And it is a problem because it's probably one of the most dangerous aspects in the European situation now. NATO has been speaking about the bolts, and it was rightly they took measures against any hybrid warfare danger for the bolt, and also reaffirming Article 5. But in the case of Ukraine, we are now in a situation which is more and more dangerous. Probably EU could have done a better job with the association agreement, but past is the past, and now we have to deal with a situation where we may have in the coming months an evolution toward a frozen conflict, and a kind of Donbass becoming a Transnistria for the Ukrainian state, unstable state. It will be the best thing for Putin because he will not have to pay for the reconstruction of Donbass and Luhansk, and at the same time, the political situation in Kiev will continue to be very, very bad. Already we see the metastasis of this cancerous situation. Women trafficking by the Ukrainian in all Europe. Mafia with the Chechen sending arms everywhere. All transactions are done now in Ukraine by cash because of measures taken both by Kiev and the separatists. Really a tremendous amount of cash. And when you have those amount of cash, you have corruption very, very near. And probably the Russians themselves are beginning to realize that it could be very dangerous for them by contamination. Now, my second point to address by the panel is we are sensing a growing crisis in the whole area. Unemployment, it has been mentioned, civil society impatience with corruption, we have seen in Bulgaria, for example, enlargement fatigue in the EU capital. And even in NATO, the issue of open door is still something which is rhetorical rather than active, and it is not the Montenegro example which will change that. Therefore, we are witnessing the creation of a political power vacuum in the area, inviting a new Russian activism. It has been mentioned before on Montenegro and Bulgaria. And we have also the Chinese new interest. It has also been mentioned. The historian of the future will be very, very intrigued about the fact that a Habsburgian project like the Belgrade-Vienna railway is done with Chinese money. It is a typical 19th century Habsburgian thing. Chinese interest in the 21st. At the height of the Balkan crisis in the 90s, we basically made a collective bet, a political bet. Time will ensure a positive evolution. We had faith on the effect of the passing of generation, the reconciliation of memories, the focus on the future integration in European NATO framework. We also saw, and it was mentioned before, the promise of the benefit of local pragmatic arrangement, like in Pristina, and local cooperation between neighbors. So, three questions. Where were you, too optimistic? And perhaps we do need to consider a much longer time framework for the problem to be sorted out at the risk of increasing disillusion in the Balkan country. Second issue, did we invest enough money and enough political attention to this situation? Angelica told us about 20-30 billion in the last 10 years in the Balkan. I remind, and my neighbor, the Polish ambassador, will confirm that we are spending 10 billion a year in Poland. So you see the difference of scale. Third issue, European public opinion expects from the EU that it protect their homeland. The new slogan which came from the anniversary from Malta is Europe should be protecting us. And this is the way it could be reconciled with the public opinion in Europe. But how to deal with the risk of the Balkan becoming again a source of organized crime, human trafficking, terrorism, foreign fighter included, how to foster the intra-Balkan cooperation which was mentioned on those issues, and what extra price the EU is ready to pay on the political level to get a safe Balkan. So with those three questions, which are not totally optimistic, but which are worth to be really dealt with, I pass the floor to the panelists. Who want to speak first? Yeah.
Good afternoon. Let me thank for this opportunity to share this podium with the distinguished speakers. Let me thank Ambassador Minuto Rizzo and to the NATO Defense College Foundation. We are all faced with a challenge, as one of the last panel speakers said. It is a good word, and it is becoming common in our vocabulary, not only with regard to the Balkans, but everywhere else, including Washington. Now, Mr. Chairman, you sent me an email assigning me a topic, which was whether a Turkish view of the Balkans existed.
Alessandro was also an accomplice.
Accomplice. Now, I assume that my response would share with you some information about Ankara's policy on the Balkans. Let me confess right here, humbly, that I am as mystified by Ankara's foreign policy pronouncements as I believe most of you in this room are. But I will try, and what I will try is to convey the conclusions I have drawn personally by my observations, as well as kind of engagement Turkey has had with the Balkan countries in the recent past. So what conclusions one may draw from those? Let me begin with my own experience, my discovery of Turkey's engagement with Macedonia last fall, when I was invited to speak by a German foundation in Skopje on essentially the same topic, sharing the podium with a German colleague who's a Russia expert, Russia's involvement with the Balkans and Turkey's involvement with the Balkans. My point there was that although the Balkans had been a key neighborhood in which Ankara would build relationships to pursue at one time zero problems with neighbors policy of Mr. Davutoglu, the former foreign minister and former prime minister, the situation had completely changed since that time after repeated parliamentary elections in Turkey. The longtime foreign policy maker, advisor to Mr. Erdogan, then foreign minister, then prime minister Davutoglu, had been distanced from the government. Turkey's economy had taken a nosedive in the wake of the conflict in the southeast, and the domestic problems would detract from foreign policy making agenda. Now, Turkey was turning towards its own problems, as all of you are following from the news since a few months here. But that afternoon, I was taken for a sightseeing, walking through Skopje. First, the new Skopje, which has a Disneyland atmosphere, much to my regret, reflecting a wanton destruction of history and culture. And then we went to the old town, and I was even more surprised than the old town. There was an Ashura festivity. Ashura is a kind of pudding that, that heterodox Muslims basically have, and they do not drink any water that day. This is the anniversary of the defeat in Karbala of Orthodox caliphs in the early days of Islam, Orthodox caliphs' sons, and the split between basically Orthodox and heterodox, in other words, Sunni and Shia Islam. I'm coming to this because it is pertinent with regard to the current role of Turkey. This festivity was in full progress. Free fruit drinks and Ashura pudding distributed, and young men and women dancing traditional folk dances. Now, what was even more surprising, that these festivities had been organized and funded totally by the municipality of Bursa in Turkey, the seat of the car industry. It is an AKP municipality. An AKP, the Justice and Development Party, is known to take a very dim view of heterodox Muslims, such as the Alevi population in Turkey. Why then was this turnabout? Now, this example clearly shows that the established Muslim networks and support in the Balkans by AKP organizations, particularly at the municipal and NGO levels, are very much alive. But it is more important to keep for AKP organization at all hierarchical levels to keep these networks rather than distinguished as in Turkey, saying this is heterodox, we will not have anything to do with it. I mean, Bursa municipality would never do anything near this within Turkey. So this is a, it just occurred to me that I was very lucky to see this myself, at which level these networks are being kept. This example reinforces, in a sense, what I had said in the previous Balkan conference in Rome, NATO Defense College conference, earlier, that Turkey had actually that Turkey initially got engaged in the Balkans earlier than the EU, and certainly much earlier than the US, particularly during the Bosnia conflict. And this was before the AKP government, and the emphasis on Muslim population in the neighborhood. The emphasis on Muslim networks is a more recent development with the AKP government in Turkey. Now, the second step was Mr. Davutoğlu's policy priorities with respect to Turkey's reconstruction and development assistance to the area. This, I had said earlier, shifted in time from an R&D assistance to essentially supporting Muslim or Ottoman culture and cultural heritage, restoration particularly of mosques, and so on, almost to the degree that overwhelmingly so, that the funds came to be largely directed to assistance given not only to restoration, but to schools with a view to enhancing an Islam-informed, a Muslim kind of education in the Balkans. That shift was really through the first decade of since 2000. Certainly the networks established are effective ways to maintain and even enhance Turkey's influence among a significant group of increasingly observant Muslims in Bosnia, Macedonia, and other parts of the Balkans. Now, let me bring two questions. To what extent is the Turkish government likely to use its Balkans networks as a means for leverage with respect to its newly developed rivalry with the EU? In his confrontation recently with the Netherlands, Mr. Erdogan used the Srebrenica massacre as a way to attack the Dutch. It was meant to be offensive and served to raise tensions between Holland and Turkey to the breaking point. It would have been a casus belli, certainly in 19th century Europe. But it was it raised the tensions quite high. But European observers of Turkish-EU relations were quick to associate Mr. Erdogan's tactics of raising tensions with his tactics for winning elections, that raise tensions and then you'll be the winner. Except that in this case, I guess the tensions in Turkey had been raised enough over the past decade or so that this time foreign raising tensions with European countries would come in handy, especially appealing to the large crowd's sense of dignity against European domination, such as Holland basically disallowing and deporting a Turkish minister. Now, was this the only reason, or could we also, given that both the greater region that includes Southeastern Europe and Turkey is very prone to conspiracy theories, could it also be an effective push in the direction of reorienting Turkey away from Europe? It's a point to consider. One doesn't know. But second point is that the so-called rapprochement, or perceived cooperation with Russia, that raised apprehensions in Europe about Turkey's changing role in the Balkans. At the time when the appeal and therefore leverage of the EU had diminished, and the EU had become more preoccupied with its internal issues, could Russia and Turkey together exert seriously destabilizing pressure on the Balkan neighborhood? That was the question. That threat was taken very seriously by my friend, close friend and colleague Ivan Krestev, who a couple of weeks ago basically wrote and warned of such a threat and earnestly appealed to both the EU, Europe as a whole, and the US to seriously engage in the Balkans. He said, in fact, that unless the EU and the US make the Balkan vision a priority, a geopolitical priority, it may be lost because the Balkans have been waiting and they're not getting the right signals of the level of interest and engagement. But other observers have different views, who have argued that regardless of how Russia and Turkey would try to influence the region by using their historical or cultural, ties with the region, and regardless of how much the region might have lost its patience with the empty rhetoric coming from the EU, the people's choice of their own future lay in Western Europe. Nobody emigrated to Moscow nor towards Ankara. They all went to the West. Now, with this topography, let me end with 3 brief points. One is that Turkey and Russia are not likely to cooperate in the Balkans, in fact, anywhere else, to the degree that is being flaunted by particularly Ankara, to a lesser extent by Moscow. I think the rapprochement is much exaggerated. There is little evidence that Mr. Putin has forgotten or forgiven the downing of the Russian plane by the Turks. In many other ways, Moscow's and Ankara's priorities do not coincide. Not in Syria, not in other places. They can dance together for tactical reasons for a while, but the lead would be Mr. Putin in that case. My second point is that Turkey, as I said, no longer has the economic means to project its influence in the region. Its economic growth is stalling, and its society is challenged to a debilitating degree by tensions and divisions. Its ambitions to claim leadership of the region seem to have come to naught. Just in the last 2 or 3 weeks, both the Russian and the US chiefs of general staff met at the invitation of the Turkish head of general staff in Antalya, where the Russian and the American generals basically sang to the same tune of telling Turkey not to interfere with the military operations in Syria. Another one recently is that, in fact, happening yesterday and today, that Turkey reacted, and Erdogan personally reacted very strongly against the Kurdish flag flying in Kirkuk. And he said that bring that flag down, otherwise you'll have to bear the consequences, to Mr. Barzani. Barzani, 1 day later, said that flag is not going to come down. Another one, particularly, it may not be so much seen in this angle, but certainly from Ankara it's seen in this angle, the way in which red carpet treatment was given to Mr. Sisi in Washington, where Sisi is considered by AKP as a person who is waging a war against true believers. 3 examples. Now, that said, my last point, I cannot refrain from also saying something more realistic, and therefore, I'd basically say that it takes a great deal of power and leverage, and economic and political leverage, to build and achieve stability. The opposite, to do the opposite, is easier to achieve. Bringing back to the beginning of the first session, that it is, we have to be very careful about how the fragility of the Balkans could be taken advantage by unfriendly intentions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Evin. Just one question. You spoke about a dance which will not lead to a romance between Russia and Turkey, but what about the energy cooperation?
Very simple. We can come back to energy, but right now it is Mr. Putin 1, Mr. Erdogan 0, Mr. Putin 1, EU 0.
Thank you very much. We can come back on the question on that. Ambassador Ostrovsky.
As you see, the situation in the Balkans is dramatically changing, because it is not Mrs. Jelena Milic, but myself. I will, requested by Alessandro, I will speak a little bit about another dimension of politics dedicated to Western Balkans, coming from Poland. And I will start with the kind of answer to 2 questions put by Benoît d'Aboville. Were we too optimistic? And are we invest enough in Balkans? It is obvious, if we invest enough, we could feel optimistic, but it is not really the situation. I think enlargement fatigue, you said, Benoît. I have a feeling that many countries felt enlargement fatigue a day of 1st May 2004. In the sense, it was in this moment when new countries arrived to the Union, it was a mistake to not feel together optimism due to the fact that we are able as Union to enlarge. And now we are paying a price for it. Enlargement for us, as Poland, have 3 dimensions. First of all, we have an own testimony how important is the possibility of transformation of economic and social structures of the country for being a modern, even modest, but well-organized economy and society. It is important as message for our friends from Balkans, and not only Balkans. Secondly, our feeling is that enlargement as process is not only our possibility to arrange the stability of the region, but to offer to Europe some new future. It is quite hard, but it is important. We can't consider Western Balkans only as challenge, but as opportunity. And for us, this opportunity, being a country quite distant from Balkans,
it is not only dedicated to this region, but to the future of Europe. You know, it is not for deciding tomorrow or even next year what will be the future we will propose to the Eastern Partnership countries, but at least to keep some open door of European Union for the future could provide some stability in eastern neighborhood of Europe. In this sense, for us, to fulfill the promise of European Union to enlarge in Balkans, it's not only a proposal in itself, but it is the politic for the future. To be too optimistic, certainly when the President of the European Commission declared that during his mandate of 5 years, the enlargement will not continue, will not have a next stage, it was a mistake. It was a great political mistake. And this political mistake had the consequences. Our credibility is now not fully accepted in the region. When our ministers was unable to adopt during GAC conclusion in December the strong declaration about the future of Balkans, it was a political mistake, and we are considering it was a very negative political signal. The fact that in 2015 the enlargement package will not be published, it is another mistake. As you see, we have a series of mistakes made by a European Commission, by ourselves. In this sense, to listen High Commissioner Mogherini after her visit to the region, that the Balkans can easily become one of the chessboards where the big power game can be played, it is for us a very preoccupating and very realistic opinion. Poland is determined to prevent this scenario. For this reason, we are considering we need the real cooperation with regions, not only at European level, but even by bilateral means. We are still, and as I say, we are not the country geographically so connected to Balkans. You are the second provider of Kosovo force in military terms. We are now the first provider of police force in Kosovo. It means Poland has not to have the lesson from other countries. And in this sense, we are proposing to have more positive approach for Balkans. Not to saying just Balkans, it is our concern for the future. You know, if we wish to play a role, like Mogherini said, play a role in Europe, play a role in the global politics, we have to start with something. And Balkans, it will be the best lesson for Europeans to show that we are able to prevent crisis, we are able to manage our neighborhood, we are able to show the interest of our political model. If not, we are opening both geopolitical side for another countries and social economic model for the countries who will propose to welcome to Western Balkan to follow their way. It could be Russia, it could be Turkey, it could be some Muslim Arabic countries. In any case, it will not be Europe.
And if we are unable to propose a package in the same time for the stability in the security terms, economic development, and good neighborhood, we are enabled to propose a stronger common foreign and security policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I just want to remind that Balkans is absolutely critical for the credibility of the EU, because the ESDP in the 90s started with the Balkan crisis, and the EU played a central role. But Ambassador Ostrovsky has been in Paris for a long time, and he knows a French playwright of the 19th century, Musset, who said a door should be neither open nor closed. So I think that we are in that situation.
Thank you. Does work, yeah. The topic over the horizon, external actors, China and the United States was assigned to me. That's one of the big mysteries of this week. Why? But let's see or how try to locate the two external powers in actors into the Balkans. When this was assigned to me, I think it was not because I come from Norway, because there is no special relation with China, at least when it comes to the Balkans. What we try to do is to have an active politics on the Western Balkans. Government a couple of days ago declared that they will double the financial support for the Western Balkans. That's not a substantial amount compared with what comes from the EU and others, but it's meant to be a political signal of more focus on this region. So I take this opportunity to, of course, focus on the two external powers, China and the United States, and misuse the opportunity also to comment on some of the other issues relevant to the region. And I will start with China, in a hope that some clarity will come on America during my intervention. And one aspect of this is that both the US and China are relatively newcomers, historically newcomers in the region. China is the most recent, but compared with some of the others mentioned here, they are newcomers. One other aspect is that in the region, you can quite often hear that these major external actors, they are named the governors, which is not a positive, not necessarily positive meant, but it has the implication of being a governor is that there is a lack of partnership, and there is more an attitude of moral and political superiority from the external powers and actors. And this has certainly some consequences for the relations between the major political actors and the countries in the region. Now, it should be said also that I don't know exactly if we can talk about the European Union as an external actor, because the European Union has a comprehensive network of contractual relations, so they're both in, and the countries are both in and out. So European Union maybe is not an external actor. But when it comes to China, as one of the emerging actors in the region, they are definitely not among those who will be labeled the governors, because they are not so visible, but they are very present. It should be said, though, that when there are Chinese investments, there would also normally be quite a number of Chinese. So in that sense, it's visible, but they don't have a high profile. On the other hand, they invest quite a lot. They have developed, China has developed their own kind of structural platform on the 16+1, which makes a nice corridor along the old Iron Curtain in Europe. Finland is not there, so it's not to the Barents Sea, but at least from the Baltic down to Tallinn, from Tallinn to Tirana and Sofia, where they have their own platform, their own structure, where they invest quite heavily, and within this framework they develop also the bilateral relations with the individual countries. This is primarily an economic instrument for investments, possibly for trade, but most likely it doesn't come without any kind of attachment with small letters with political implications. Some years ago, quite a number of years ago, Skopje tested out the pragmatism on the Chinese one China policy, and there were some immediate consequences. In 2010, Liu Xiaobo was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and the only country which decided, or one of the few countries which decided not to attend, at least in Europe, the only one, that was Serbia. It happened that the foreign minister at that time who decided on this was Vuk Jeremic, one of the candidates in the recent elections, and the one who ended up to represent Serbia was Sasha Jankovic, the other one of the other candidates, but no one from the official Serbia. And the reason was, of course, that they had to take into consideration some other interest of the country as well. Now, some days ago, the outgoing president of Serbia visited China. He was named the steel friend of China by President Xi Jinping. And for Nikolic, it was a holiday and a day to remember for the whole country and for the people. It's something which really gets attention in Serbia and in the other countries. The Chinese firm High Steel Group just acquired a steel mill, which is one of the major industrial companies in the country. And what was the situation? No one else would acquire it. It was no interest, but the Chinese came. And China has recently become one of the largest FDI investors in Albania. The Bankers Petroleum, the Canadian company, was taken over by a Chinese company. So they are active. There are mainly investments, but also potential for trade. And we have countries, we could call it investment-hungry countries, who need the money. So it's not easy to say no when the offers comes. So, and in addition, China can be or is perceived often as a neutral investor when tensions runs high between Russia and the West. They can come in and fill that gap. Another aspect is that compared with the relatively slow process of project preparations and other institutional obstacles when it comes to the European Union, China can be quick. And of course, as it's said from the European Union, it's not always maybe that China observes the regulations of the European Union, which should be done by the countries. But money talks. So they are active and they are present, and there are certainly political and geopolitical implications of the engagement. For the United States, a former minister in a government of Montenegro used to say that the Americans used to come with proposals that they cannot refuse, and the European Union used to come with proposals that they cannot understand. And that's also a problem, because the broad agenda of the European Union, that requires a certain complexity when it comes to agreements. They have a broad agenda. Now it could also be said about the United States that they have a broad agenda compared with China, but it's different from what the European Union has. Referring to the presentation of the China-Serbia relations when Vice President Joe Biden visited Belgrade last year. They outlined the partnerships between the countries, partners in security, partners in development, partners in business, partners in justice, partners in education and culture. So it's a broad agenda. So they are active, they are there, but from time to time it's hard to see what is the strategy behind, what is the objective. The United States came a kind of backwards into the Balkans in the 1990s, after Yugoslavia, in a totally different Europe, because Europe could not deal with the problems, so the United States couldn't stand still and wait to see. They had to engage. And to a certain extent, this entangled the Americans into a lot of micromanagement in the region, which makes the profile a bit complex. And when Fingerspitzengefühl is not an American expression, it's easy to say that they are loud and clear, but they are not very much engaged in long-term processes. The solutions should be rather quick, not necessarily sustainable either, but at least quick. And this haunts the American role in the region as I see it. Yes, they are there for political reasons, even geopolitical reasons, but they have become entangled in a lot of micromanagement, which confuse their profile. And some of the interventions could also be non-sustainable. There are a number of examples. It could be maybe not too serious, but it could be mentioned. Like when Madeleine Albright received Milorad Dodik some 15 years ago, she felt a kind of fresh air in the room. And certainly there was some air, but if it was fresh, that's remained to be seen. These kind of interventions are not necessarily sustainable. And how is the Americans perceived in the region? Of course, those of you from the region should answer on that. But one interesting test case is going on for the time being, and that is in Kosovo, where the president and the government found it opportune to confront the United States and NATO, obviously for domestic reasons. A couple of years ago, it would certainly not pay off with this kind of confrontation in Kosovo, but now they estimate that, yes, it can pay off to confront these closest allies of the countries. This is a signal of a change. At least it's a test, which we could not have experienced a couple of years ago. So the respect, so to say, has changed over the years. And the case is, of course, the Kosovo Security Force transformed into a Kosovo Armed Force, and that, with the reaction from the United States and the NATO and a number of other countries, that turned into a confrontation. Now it will certainly not be materialized, but it was a test. It should be seen that KFOR is, or Kosovo, has probably the most robust military protection of any country, any non-NATO country, because if you trespass the borders into Kosovo, you will encounter a NATO-led force. And so that's more robust than a limited small Kosovo army, certainly. So it will not materialize, but it was a test. Another aspect of the engagement is not only being short-sighted and micromanaged, but it's also a tendency to turn black into white, to have a very simple approach, either against or in favor, which is also a dilemma. I do not say that this is a specifically American approach, but we see it from time to time from the American, and my point is that it is perceived to be American approach from many in the region. Let's say, take two examples. In Montenegro, it would not be very wise to say that everybody who are skeptical or against the NATO membership are necessarily on the payroll of the Russians. It's a democratic right to be skeptical or against. We could, the same could be said about the European Union. It's, if you are skeptical or against the membership in the European Union, you are not per definition anti-democratic or undemocratic. It has to be left some space for the gray zones. It could also be said about the current situation in Skopje. It's not black or white. There are certainly gray zones. So simple, quick solutions is not necessarily the answer. So what will be the future? And that was my problem. How will the US engage in the future? Honestly, I don't know, but my guess is that they will continue their presence in the region. They are a major actor, and they will continue to be. But the motivation will be more and more geopolitical, and if they don't find a reason to be there for geopolitical reasons, they will leave the region to the Europeans. So it's more up to the Russia-US relations than it's about the Balkans. The internal situation in the Balkans will be left to the Europeans, most probably. Or if the confrontation with the Russia continues, they will continue to be there for geopolitical reasons. Anyhow, we have reason to believe that the Americans will change their presence to a certain extent, if not for any other reasons, for budgetary reasons. The budgetary priorities in the United States are different from what we have seen in the previous years. So there will be less money for all the contacts, all the partnerships which I referred to, civil society support and so on, could face a future with less funding from the United States. So at least in these sectors, it could be less of the Americans if the priorities from the new administration will be confirmed.
Thank you very much. I like very much your definition of a... I like very much your definition of a Chinese proposal that you neither can refuse nor understand. But now, on the US, I remember a colleague of mine in NATO saying that one of the reasons the US was so active on the Bosnian side in Sarajevo was also to make clear that they were supporting Muslim toward the opinion in the Middle East, where they are not so well perceived because of Israel. So I think that this element will remain. I also think that the military presence in Kosovo, which is in a way one of the few big bases of the US in the area, will continue, if only for the issue of anti-terrorist fight. And in the past, the US has used Camp Bondsteel as a way station for a lot of anti-terrorist action. So I think it will continue. And it is not too costly in a budget of 650 billion. So I think that they will. Of course, they can let to the European a lot of the dirty work of fighting corruption, legal order, and politicians. But I think that they will be very interested in staying in the area. But we can discuss that.
No.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Chairman, if you allow me, I will start where we actually stopped. Because China is a very interesting factor, I spent several years as Director of International Cooperation of Bulgarian Ministry of Defense. And going back to my career in the MOD, I can say that we observe Chinese intervention in the region, active intervention, it started in the mid of first decade of 21st century. It started with big number of delegations at different levels, and after that, China started very aggressive economic activities through Exim Bank, cheap loans, a lot of projects. But still, China is very unclear to me factor on the Balkans. If you allow me, I will share with you some thoughts about more clear factor, and it's Russia. And I'll speak about role of Russia in the Balkans, and I'll try to look through the prism of Russia-Balkans relation, what happened here, what development we can expect. And I took Bulgaria, my own country, as a case study to illustrate some activities of Russia. But why Russia is on the Balkans? It was very clearly stated by Alexander Pivovarenko from Kremlin's think tank, so-called Russia International Affairs Council. He said that region is of traditional, historical, and geostrategic importance for Russia and has a largely benevolent attitude. But in order to understand Russia's role and the consequences of its policy on the Balkans, we need to analyze interests, strategic goals, and the methods Russia uses. On 23rd of March, just a couple of weeks ago, speaking in front of officers from the military academy, Sergei Lavrov stated, and I quote, "We are seeing an overlap of key interests between Russia and the countries from the region on many topics." And I think this is the main issue we have to address, whether Russia and the countries from the region share the same key interests and goals as Russia believes it is. And the Balkan countries have openly stated their aspiration to join Euro-Atlantic community and to establish Western liberal democratic forms of government. And here we see a clear division of interests between those of Russia and the countries from the region. It is clear that the Balkans and Russia do not share the same strategic orientation and interests. And this should be recognized and accepted. And of course, this does not preclude from cooperation in different spheres, political, economic, cultural, but again, on strategic levels or strategic interests, there are differences. Today, Balkans are experiencing a wide range of challenges, economic difficulties, risk pertaining to radicalization and terrorism, the migration wave, ethnic and religious tension, unresolved regional disputes. This picture is exacerbated by EU difficulties to address vital issues, the Brexit, uncertainties regarding the new US presidency, and the stalling enlargement process both in NATO and the EU. The activities of actors like China, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey make the situation even more complicated. All this creates a security vacuum in the region, which Russia is exploiting by presenting itself as a security provider to the Balkan countries, especially to Slavic and Orthodox people. What is more, Kremlin is trying to present itself as a credible and promising economic and political counterpart for Balkan countries. Russia is trying to create a mental landscape susceptible to political manipulation using different assets, loans, energy projects, trade, and other investments, interfering in EU issues and trying to delay the European integration of the Western Balkans. The Kremlin is creating a network of friendly local NGOs and media. Even the Russian church is also being used in the political activities through friendly Orthodox churches. Russia's actions are not chaotic, but rather part of a broader strategic approach and long-term policy towards the region. This vision can be seen in the remarks of the former director of the Russian Institute for Strategic Studies, Leonid Reshetnikov, who was appointed at this position by the President Putin in 2009. He has stated that Russia is obliged to return to the Balkans, primarily as a humanitarian actor. He continued, We must actively develop our presence there and work more toughly and purposefully with the leaders of these countries, and through economic leverages, force the leaders of the countries to start understanding what we don't like, end quote. He additionally stated that the economic relations between the Balkan countries must be subordinated to the political relations. Furthermore, he also criticized the Russian government for not paying enough attention to NGOs in the region and not creating its own information sphere. In a similar manner, Mr. Pivovarenko from RIAC has stated that Russia's role in the region has long been heavily linked with culture, liberalization, civilization. Consequently, while investing in infrastructure, we also have to invest in people and in relations with people who see Russia as an alternative force in today's polycentric world. All this illustrates Russia's general approach to increase its influence in the Balkans, even though relations of Russia with other countries are very specific. And I would briefly touch upon Bulgaria and how Russia behaves. The concept of this approach of Russia to Bulgaria was described by Sergei Baranov, a popular pro-Kremlin Russia sociologist, in his recently published article. He argues that the stability of current Bulgaria is not in Russia's interests. The country should be taken away from the hands of the West and be returned to the real allies, meaning Russia. Mr. Baranov claims that Bulgaria is a social, economic, and political victim of the EU. The internal destabilization and exiting NATO and EU is desirable development for Bulgaria. By the way, for this article, there were hearings in Bulgarian parliament, and Sergei Baranov was declared persona non grata. From this paper, it is clear that Moscow's strategy is to spur anti-Western sentiments and propaganda in Bulgaria. The method is very simple and straightforward. Increasing nationalist hysteria, escalating the frustration of Bulgarian citizens, exploiting the accumulated fatigue from the years of transition, capitalizing on people's discontent with failed reforms, and so on and so on. It is clear that Kremlin is using all possible methods to increase in influence in Bulgaria. And the basis for this behavior is the general favorable attitude of the Bulgarian society towards Russia, which is associated with the liberation from the Ottoman Empire. Even after the annexation of Crimea, Bulgarian people continue to uphold a favorable outlook to Russia. A public opinion poll conducted in 2015 found that 50% of Bulgarians continued to hold a positive view on Moscow even after the invasion in Ukraine. It was also found that 61% of Bulgaria opposed financial sanctions on Russia. But it doesn't mean that Bulgarians are against NATO and EU, even more. Overwhelming majority supports the European way of Bulgaria. These general positive views on Russia are used in propaganda campaigns and attempts to influence Bulgarian policies. Russia's involvement in the Bulgarian presidential and parliamentary elections in 2016 and 2017 was very clear. Even an article was published in Wall Street Journal saying and explaining how Russia behaves in Bulgaria. In this article, it is mentioned that a messenger from the Kremlin provided the Bulgarian Socialist Party, which has close connections with Russia, with instructions how to win elections by promoting fake news and exaggerated social surveys results on party success. In the recently published paper titled Russian Influence on Bulgaria, Dimitar Bechev, a renowned Bulgarian analyst and a fellow of the Center of European Policy at Harvard University, examines Russian influence in Bulgaria as complex and multi-layer, which is resulting in the division of Bulgarian nation. This influence is being exercised through economic relations, relations between certain Bulgarian politicians and the Kremlin, ties between political parties and the business to Russia, Russian gas and oil, large infrastructure projects such as South Stream and nuclear power plant Belene, the acquisition of strategic Bulgarian companies with Russian finances, dependency of the army on the import of spare parts, influence through media. And Russia has proven very successful in this undertaking through media outlets and internet trolls, part of which are controlled by businessmen with personal interest to do business with Russia. Moreover, it is interesting to know that pro-Russian and anti-EU, anti-NATO articles from this media are very well coordinated and overlap, creating the illusion that many unrelated news websites have reached the same conclusion. One of the approaches is to use fake news in order to split the public. And just a brief example from the last year, Bulgarian pro-Western president was publicly blamed for inviting to celebrate the independence from Ottoman rule the Turkish President Erdogan, but not inviting the Russian President Putin. This was entirely fabricated. The information was initiated by an unknown small Bulgarian pro-Russian website, republished by Russian media, from where the news were taken to all Bulgarian media. This particular information was denounced by Bulgarian authorities, but harm was done. And unfortunately, most of such kind of disinformation and fake news are left unaddressed by officials. And while speaking of Bulgaria, I'm sure that we see a lot of similarities with different countries. And the reason is simple. Russia wants to destroy the unanimity within NATO and EU, and by this to block the decision-making process. Obviously, Russia cannot effectively win the hearts and minds of the people in the Balkans, nor does it represent an attractive role model for governance. Moscow also cannot offer attractive economic prospects, especially when compared to EU. And yet, Russia is very efficiently modeling a positive impression of itself that resonates many people, based on tradition, Orthodox Christianity history. Russia's influence in the Balkans is a proof of the power of sentiments over facts. And let me conclude by saying that the Balkan region is currently developing, which road the region will take will rely on wise policies. Many of the countries from the region are experiencing serious economic and political difficulties, and in order to stabilize the region as well as the individual countries, strengthening democracy, combating corruption, diversification of supplies, economic and social development, EU integration, and overcoming dependency on Russian imports are essential to stop. Furthermore, all factors that are not in line with this has to be countered. It is also important to develop regional cooperation in order to address and cope with current risks and threats. And I just want to inform the distinguished audience that Sofia Security Forum at Konrad Adenauer Foundation initiated and already working on the creation of Southeast European Security network of think tanks and NGOs, which will work together to counter all this risk and threat I spoke about, and hopefully to contribute to the development of the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I just observed that Bulgaria is not only Balkan, but also Black Sea. And the Black Sea evolution is also an important factor, even if it is not Balkans per se. Now we will give the floor to the Assembly, and I hope that we will get tough questions to the panel. So who want to be the first questioner? Or to respond to some of... yes. Yes, sir?
Over there. My name is Aryan Starov. I am from Albania, represent the Atlantic Council of Albania. I heard from the panel something which had to do with Kosovo and the so-called transformation of the Kosovo security forces would create confrontations in the area. And allegedly, US and NATO have said that this is not allowed and warned Kosovo about that. I wanted to clarify that the truth is slightly different. It was not like that, but NATO and US said to the Kosovo authorities that they can't change the security force of Kosovo into an army of Kosovo without previously making constitutional changes. So it's a difference between what was expressed by the panel and between this and this idea which was expressed concerning the issue. I only wanted to make this clarification because I'm positive about that. I know it very well. It is like that. So the Army of Kosovo is going to be created, but after constitutional changes there. Because once we have Kosovo as an independent country, of course, this is something which will happen now or later. That's the logic of an independent country which has the support of EU, OSCE, NATO, UN, and other international factors. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this clarification. If I understood you well, it is a constitutional issue related to the issue of independence, which is not approved by all the EU countries. Is it a constitutional issue? Yeah? Okay. No, if I understood you well, it is only a constitutional issue. It's not a problem of prior consultation of. Okay, just thank you for the precision. My question is it only a constitutional issue, or is it an issue which is related to the status, the political status of Kosovo? Yes?
I didn't mean to say that it is a constitutional issue, but I wanted to say that, but what I know, because I pretend to know the situation there, that they are going to form an army, but after making the changes in the constitution. Because I can't say it's a constitutional issue, but they have to pass it in the parliament. That's the idea. And the idea behind that is that there should be some consensus on the issue. But the issue of transforming the Kosovo security force into an army is there, and I think it's in the agenda because that's the logic of let's say, the establishment of that new country. That's the idea. So nobody has said that it should not be done, but it should be done after some legal changes in the Constitution.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there another question? Yes. No.
Thank you for the very interesting presentations by the panel. My name is Angelina Eichhorst. I'm an eternal student, and I'm glad there are many students here. My question, just to come back on the colleague from Albania, I fully agree with your statement. As the European Union, we had the same position as NATO and the United States in this regard. Constitutional change needed, and from there. What would be the different members' advice on Russia for the Western Balkans? What should not just we as European Union institutions, but also, and I'm turning to our friends from the region, do? We have not tried and done as yet before, until now.
Who want to, yeah?
Let me say some words. I do believe that Russian policy on the Balkans is not isolated policy. It's a part of the more bigger Russian strategy, how Russia sees it in the world, its influence. So from this point of view, the issue of Russia and the Balkans should be addressed on different levels. First, on the level of EU and NATO. After that, we have to clearly state that the Balkans, it's a part of EU, if not now, but in a very close future, because it will put a big barrier on the Russian influence in different countries. I give an example with Bulgaria. Bulgaria is a member of NATO and EU, but still, when it comes to the big issues related to supply of energy or other issues, we can rely fully on NATO and EU. Otherwise, Bulgaria is very weak to extend Russia's interests and to prevent Russian influence on the territory.
I would say the question was, we have the enlargement fatigue in Europe. And my other question for addressing the future of presence of Russia in the Balkans is, could we speak about some no enlargement fatigue of the countries of the region? If European Union is unable to deliver, attraction made by Russia will be stronger. It is quite easy. Russia is proposing something very concrete as political and economical model. It's, for instance, it is well accepted from part of political scene in Serbia. If we are not able to propose something of concrete, to not have the real strong policy toward Balkans in the terms of states approaching enlargement, probably we will have more interest of the political forces in the Balkans to accept Russian alternative. It is the first point. The second one is, what is Balkans for Russia? It is a little bit a word, at least our part of the word, in the micro scale. It is Roman Catholic, Orthodox, and Muslim community. And the relation between these three forces, it is a little bit the situation Russia is managing now. The third point is, it is some connection between Balkans and Russia, or former Soviet area. And many times when I'm hearing people saying, but finally the Russian proposal of constitutional reform of Ukraine for having more involvement of Russian-speaking regions, it means grosso modo Donbass, because it is a little bit this regionalization of Ukraine proposed by Russia will be like Switzerland. My answer is no, it will not be Switzerland, but Bosnia. And in my opinion, this blocking system, institutional system, we conceived in Dayton 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, for Bosnia, could be used by Russia as model for Ukraine. Thank you.
Because I don't have an answer to the question, because nobody has. But when it comes to the Balkans, they are, to a certain extent, a kind of collateral damage when it comes to the Russia-West relation. So it has to, the Russia relation is something much wider. But one element from previous discussions here, there is one structure which can be developed as a bridge between NATO and the region, and that's KFOR, which has been a success, which is a contributor to stability in the region. It's also accepted by even staunch non-NATO countries as a provider of stability. So this instrument should be used to bridge the gap between the non-NATO countries in the region and NATO. And it's possible because it's in their self-interest to secure the presence of NATO in the region in the name of KFOR, as it is by now. This is a vital topic for Russia, as their main objective is to block further expansion of NATO, but NATO is there. NATO is a provider of security, and this should be utilized as linking up NATO and the region, using the KFOR structure as it is. And it presented as a NATO instrument, not as something separate.
Really speaking on a personal level, I think that there is a lot of past frustration of Putin about the Balkans, because at the time of great weakness of Russia, the West acted alone. And therefore, Kosovo for Moscow is still something which is a burning regret. And I remember that Putin said once, "I will do a Kosovo on you." And so, but that is the past. The present is really whether or not Russia has a concept about its neighborhood, about protecting itself from what it fears the most, which is democratic contamination. I think Putin was very shocked by the Orange Revolution and by Maidan. And what he wants basically is to have a leverage on the neighborhood country which could export freedom, democratic, and be an example for the opposition in Russia. He has election next year, and they don't seem to be so easy as he thought. So the problem is that Russia has never been able to present to the West, to the EU, to NATO, a concept of its vision of a European order. And in fact, they have destroyed the basis of that order by the Crimea invasion and rejecting the Helsinki basis, which were after all negotiated with the Russians. On the energy, I will be prudent because there has been a change in the world market of oil and gas. And now Russia has to compete with other providers, Qatar or the US, and therefore Gazprom has to appear as a more reliable and a less political provider. And I think that the Commission made a really good work on negotiating with Gazprom. It was not said enough in our press that they really got guarantee that Gazprom will abandon some of the kind of way of acting which were in fact political pressure before. And I think the Commission should be celebrated for that. On Ukraine, I think that certainly Putin had a brilliant internal political success in Crimea. On Ukraine, he has been prudent. For example, he stopped the separatists about getting too far, because at that time the EU was prepared to increase the sanction. And I think that the sanction are a key aspect of our negotiating leverage on Ukraine, because he knows that if he go further, the sanction could be really go into some very big issue like the financial, the swaps and all that. I don't think he wants to have a Russian Donbass, because it will be costly and it will bring a lot of unsavory people into. It will be like a new Chechnya. What he wants is to have an unstable Ukraine, which they can push the local politician not to go too far on democratic and so. And I am very struck that some of the heroes of Ukraine, like Mrs. Tymoshenko, is playing some very, very strange game. And Poroshenko has been obliged, because of the rightist activists, to have this stupid blockade, which is pushing even more the separatists toward Russia. The EU is working quite closely with the OSCE, and that also is something which is not reported in the press. The OSCE is maintaining about 1,000 people monitoring the situation, and they are, on the humanitarian side, they are doing extremely important job. So the Europeans are quite active on Ukraine. However, for the time being, the problem for Minsk or for the contact group is basically the weakness of the political situation in Kiev. Poroshenko cannot deliver the radar on some constitutional reform. And this is the problem. The issue is that the more we are waiting and the more the situation is getting bad for the citizen on both sides of the ceasefire, the more the tension can get out of hand. As far as Crimea, I must say that we have a specific sanction for Crimea, but I don't think that anybody in Brussels, either in NATO or in the EU, is thinking that we can recuperate Crimea. Maybe we can try to get a new referendum under OSCE supervision, but for the time being, I think we should really separate the Crimea and the Ukrainian files. But that is a personal view. Yes? Pardon?
Thank you. Event from Turkey. I would like to add something to put some other answers, try to put some other answers to Mrs. Eichhorst's question about Russia. I used to work within a civil society network which is called Southeast European Leadership for Development and Integrity for 2 years. So I had a chance to experience the cities of the West Balkans, like the sentiments, all the experts and all the meetings in all capitals, and also in Brussels, in Commission, and in the Parliament as well. I think there are 2 major problems that we are dealing with in the region. First one is ongoing identity crisis, which was started in 1989, right after the Cold War. During the Cold War, everyone knew something about the identity of their nation and their nation state and their own personality. After that, that crisis, that identity crisis is still going on. But in the 1990s, we saw that the Balkan nations didn't pick the identity of EU as like human rights, democracy. They picked the ideology of nationalism. And they put their, like right after, even after the war, they put the nationalism in their curricula. And so still there is a search for having a unifying identity. Like as being always a pro-EU Turkish citizen, let's say, like for the last 10, 12 years, like the identity and the ideology and the ideals of the EU was not that successful within the region to solve the problems, which is related with the second answer that I was like, that I have in my mind. It is about how do we respond to the economic problems within the region. I don't think that we, like, by we, I refer to like Western world. We couldn't analyze in a proper way how the 2008 crisis affected like all the societies in terms of income inequality and the discontent. But that kind of huge economic discontent aligned with the identity crisis and with the EU's own like inner crisis. So in the search of
maybe we have to finish,
sorry.
but I understood your point, but your point is not only related with Balkans. If you see the UK or even the French in the electoral campaign, both the consequences of the crisis and the identity discussion is really at the center of the policy of the populist movement against EU. So those factors, economic crisis plus identity crisis, about the globalization, about the change of the social network and so forth, all those has converged into a kind of problem for a lot of people, including the fact that the middle class has been affected very much by the economic crisis. And of course, EU appear to be a scapegoat. And, I think that Alessandro was saying that we have to prepare for a beautiful dinner, I'm sorry, in one of the most famous place in Rome, overlooking the whole city in Casino Valadier. So, Alessandro, do you want to say something about or somebody from the foundation can tell us where we go, what are the practical indications?
Hello, yes. Now that you go outside, just here at the entrance, you will find our staff that will direct you. Casino Valadier is practically in walking distance. You know, you go up the Pincio and you are practically there. It's a wonderful walk. But if you know transportation is needed, just at the end of the room you see my colleague, white dressed, Dr. Federica Lollo. She will give you all the necessary directions. And I wish you a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you. At what time is it, the dinner?
8:30.
Oh, yes, so we have 1 hour. Perfect.
So we
can recuperate.
Yeah. No, you see. No, the thing is, absolutely. But you see, the reason I said Putin 1 and EU 0 is that for
Probably je ne sais pas où tu vas.
Oui, c'est que les diplomates
connaissez.
Après moi, la prochaine fois.
See you later. I will not have a dinner.
the objective of the correct. And they did.
And they did. Thanks to Bulgaria.
Thanks to
Bulgaria. It was in Bulgaria.
Yeah.